Robert,
Yes.
we've known each other over half a century.
Jack McCoy since 1944.
44. That's when you joined the...
Research branch of the War Department that were working on morale problems of soldiers.
The Attitude Research
I
Branch.
had to,
of the
yeah,
Armed
Sam
Forces.
Stauffer, one of our early presidents here,
Yes.
was where I learned my lessons at research of this kind.
And you came in 1944.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get there? How...
Well, I took a PhD at University of Pittsburgh in 1940 on predicting attitude relations from background questions, white-Negro relations, and believe it or not, a PhD thesis. Half of it was published by American Sociological Review in their lead article thereafter, and I know I'm all right. You know, that this is a field to be in, and they'll even publish your stuff. And that was my start, really, playing around with questions, and all on my own, just as PhD thesis.
What was the path from your PhD to the research branch in the War Department?
Then, after the PhD, I got, remember the tough years of World War II just starting. To get a job was, and I wanted to get out of teaching math in high school. I wanted to be in the social studies, social sciences, and fortunately, I got a call from the University of Kentucky. Would I fill in for one semester, January to June, no longer, someone's going to war. And would you stay the summer? Yes. And then the professor, the head of the department at University of Alabama, would you come down here? One of our men's going to war. And then, no, he was going to take finish his PhD, and he was coming back. Then Mississippi State called, would you like to come over here? And I went over to Starkville, Mississippi, in deep, deep south in 1942, by that time, 42 years. Where really on Thursdays, black people could come to town in the morning, and they would with their mules and maybe 2 mules, and sitting around in the bed of a wagon and around a little coal stove. I really was deep, deep, deep in the heart of the South, and becoming more and more fascinated in research. And a woman ran our food processing, what do you call it? Women who teach how to eat and food, you know.
Nutritionists.
Yes. And she was in charge, Dorothy Dickens. And she said she had found a place where black children were eating dirt. And I said, would it be from hunger? She said, it's partly a social thing. And she said, I just think someone ought to write it up. And you had something in the American Sociological Review. How do you write it up? And I said, well, we better get a questionnaire going. And so we made out a questionnaire. And it was published by the American Sociological, or one of those. I don't have my stuff, anything with the dirt eating among Mississippi school children. Only they didn't like to say dirt eating, so they put in print geophagy. So when you if you look it up, dirt eating, geophagy among Mississippi school children. Well, by this time, I was hooked, you know. I wanted to stay in the field. And then Vanderbilt in Tennessee needed someone. And they said, would you come up here? And the president of Mississippi State, in stealth, asked me, please stay here. And I said, well, they're offering me $3,250 a year. Do you want things like this? And he said, I can't pay you like that. I make only $2,900 a year. He's president of Mississippi State. He said, now I do get a lovely, lovely home and I get a state car. I can't do more than $2,800. I couldn't pass him up. It would take state law, really. For his was set legally, but he could. So when I went to Vanderbilt, and things got so very bad in the war, 1944, and Ray Bowers, a sociologist, was in selective service, and he needed people statistically oriented, and in order to avoid taking a second foreign language, if you took advantage, they shut up, I'm telling this. In order not to have to take a second dumb language, for I hate languages, I took advanced statistics and several kinds of it. J. Stephen Stocks, he's been one of our presidents here, I think.
So he's no longer with us. He died in an airplane crash.
But I took it with him, advanced statistics, just on my own. He was in the agricultural department.
Yes, I took it with him too.
We could have met.
Stock and Franklin.
Yeah, yeah. And I had had an earlier course with another president of AAPOR, Fred Stephan. And that was at the University of Pittsburgh. He was a hard man. I remember rounding off 750 to 751. And he said, that won't do. And I said, well, it won't. Why? He said, it's rounded down. And that was quite a lesson. You understand what was happening.
Of course.
Well, I thought 50 ought to be rounded up. And I had some very good statistical training. I went to Veterans Administration with Ray Bowers. He was in uniform from the University of Rochester. And I was to predict how soon we would have to induct men. And it was my age that we were going to have to induct. And I can't pass any physical exams. I have some problems. So I would, and for officers, like to get in the Navy, you have to be able to hold inflatable things in your mouth in case the ship sinks. And I can't do that. And so I would have to go in as a buck private, and I had 2 children and a wife, and very happy. And so by then, I had friends over in the morale division. Let's see, Felix Moore.
Felix Moore, yeah.
And John Clausen. I had been to the University of Chicago. One summer, I squeezed out enough money to. Pitt was pretty weak in sociology and in psychology. And they gave me a degree, sociology-psychology, the first one they ever gave. And so I had met Stauffer.
At Chicago?
Yeah, anyone who was awake in the 1930s knew Sam Stauffer. It had to be there, and I never regretted it. And Stauffer asked for me too. When they said Bob Ford's over at Veterans Administration, they just transferred me across the street. And that's how I got in.
That's where we met.
That's where we met. That's the short
version.
The short version of my life.
Tell us a little bit about your interest. I mean, clearly, you learned how to do questionnaires. You kept doing questionnaires. You did questionnaires in the military, the American soldier. You worked on that. I'm really excited to discover that you did something on dirt eating among black children in the South, because that's a fascinating issue, a fascinating question. How did you move sort of in your career, and how did you get from the military to start being part of AAPOR's history?
Oh, that's easy. After the war, had ended. Omar Bradley, General Bradley, was going to Veterans Administration to become the head of it. And he wanted the kind of people in the Veterans Administration whom he had learned to respect in the Army, and he respected the Morale Division of Stafford and Carl Hover of Yale. And he asked for a little group of us to go over, and I agreed to do that. Vanderbilt said he modestly wanted me to come back, but he had dropped from 8,200 to 4,900. And so I left, and I never went back to teaching, but they did ask me a number of times. Now, what did you ask me?
Oh, I guess the fascination with questionnaires and asking questions.
Oh, and we really continued to work over there. Now these men are home. Some want to go to college, some want, and we have problems of insurance and this and that with them. Tell us about it. And John Clausen was really, and Felix Moore, Parker Malden.
Now, this was in the research branch of the War Department.
No, these are over now in veterans.
Felix Moore went to veterans.
Yeah.
But not John Clausen, as I recall.
Well, I would say he did because he and I did a study which was published in the Journal of the American Statistical Association, a research thing. Later on you ask about it. It was one of the research things that he and I did. And believe it or not, it was so unusual that the Journal of the American Statistical published it first. John's name is Clausen Ford because I said C is ahead of F, but he and I had a good laugh over that and had another drink. But it wasn't we did an interesting research thing there. We wanted to get to find out something about veterans, and now they're all over the United States. And we want them to reply. We need to know. And the barrel's this full, this was our analogy. And we're getting only a half barrel of response. And John and I came up with the idea, and I'm sure you all have, we'll take another sample and another sample and see how it changes as you go down the barrel. And also we did things like this time we'll use, instead of government postage, we'll put stamps on it. They're little square things, rectangular. And we did another one, well, we may have hand wrote the, and that's not in English, but you know what I mean. Anything to see if we get up the response. And that's just part of how we did it. And then predict what you're done now, quick.
These were mail questionnaires, were
Yeah,
they not?
yeah, because for whatever reason, mail questionnaires. And I just got interested and had some good people to work with. John Clausen, you knew John.
Yes.
He's very bright.
General Bradley signed them?
You're fixing his research now.
Pardon?
Jack's proposing a.
No, I'm trying to remember
But
the report that you did and how you maximized the response rate. And if you had a responsible person sign it, a government official, wasn't that one of the...
You could be right.
Wasn't that one of the triggers that you used?
This son of a gun just sang as we came here a little while ago. He sang my 8th grade graduation song. And I said, how come? He said, well, we drank enough liquor together at AAPOR to know.
We'll do that before.
Surely you didn't present, did you present your research at AAPOR in the 40s?
No,
No.
there was no AAPOR.
No. All of this then is, now you're asking, why did I go to AAPOR?
Yes.
1946. A letter comes around somehow to somebody saying that Clyde Hart wants to have a conference, Central City, Colorado, and he's going to invite some very important people. And we'd like someone from your organization. And was picked for the Veterans Administration, we had about 10 in it.
Professionals.
Yeah. 10, I'd say.
So that was your first contact with what was going to be AAPOR.
Yeah. Yeah, and they were, I know from the book, the wonderful book, Sheetsley and Matowski, that there were only 73 of us, and you were one. And you were representing
I was representing the War Department
yeah,
post-war.
yeah, sure.
Then which had become the Department of Defense.
And were you the only one from that group?
I was the only one from that group, yes.
And I think I was the only one from Veterans Administration.
So we re-met in Central City in Colorado, where which is the organizing place for what was to become,
Yeah,
what was to become the American Association
yeah,
for
yeah.
Opinion Research.
And I was very impressed with the seriousness of the problem. At that time, Gallup, Crosley, Roper made it perfectly clear that there was some awfully cheap, bad research being done. And they really were having an effect upon what was done nationally in states and so on. And I fell in love with AAPOR. And also the good fellowship in that Teller House. If you remember, we had the face on the barroom floor.
Yes, in the Opera House.
Yeah, in the Opera House, yeah. And that was really quite a dramatic thing for younger people. And to meet people like Gallup, Crosley, Roper, Hart. Sam Stauffer wasn't there. But
So in the Veterans Administration, where did you go from there?
we stayed there 2 years, and I got a call. I knew things. Bradley left. Ace in the hole. And the next person in was obviously old line political. And I said, well, there goes that. And I had been assigned to Italy for 6 months in uniform. You remember we wore uniform, but I can't pass anything. So you just wear US on your collar, scientific consultant. And I spent 6 months over there. Doug Williams was my commanding officer in Italy, and he was a member of our group there at Stauffer's group. And he was a real public opinion man. I don't know that he ever belonged here to AAPOR. I'm not sure. I won't say. And he'd been asked by AT&T. They were having customer research. And the man, statistician's office, was Ted Smith. A very serious, very fine guy. And he had now serial studies and attitude toward your service. And he was being asked more and more because of AAPOR and people like them. Why don't we do something about our employees? We have some employee problems you wouldn't believe. Doug called me and said, AT&T would like to call you, talk to you. And I was in the throes of changing, and Vanderbilt wanted me back, and I wanted to go back, but they still didn't come up very high. And AT&T knocked them out of the box. And they offered me $8,500 in 1947, and children, that was a lot of money. And I lived happily ever after. I never left.
So what research did you do at AT&T?
They wanted me to then do the kind of studies we did in the Army. I used Gutman scaling, and we made out an employee attitude questionnaire, a rank and file, not for management. And I had about 6 or 7 Gutman scales in it. Like satisfaction with your various parts of your benefit plan, satisfaction with your work, opportunities for women, all that sort of thing. No, we wouldn't have had scales on all those. I really don't remember what all the scales were. And they ran that questionnaire. I wanted to just do nth person sampling, of course, you know, our style. And they wouldn't, the companies wouldn't have it. We want all our employees. Did you see these questions? I'd like to see the answers.
Self-administered?
All over the Bell system. We had 23 companies, plus Western Electric, and companies laying cables under the sea and all that. We didn't involve Western Electric and all these other subsidiaries. We just involved the operating telephone companies. And the companies then were comparing themselves with each other. And it was up to them. They're the data. It's up to you to make what you wish of it. And that's how it got started.
Were those self-administered anonymous questions?
No, they were certainly anonymous. AT&T is simply advisory, you know. If a company didn't want to do it, and there were some who didn't, some of them didn't care very much for me. They thought they knew all this sort of thing. But almost everybody did it. And then they started comparing this department to that department, the operator's job, the information operator's job, the service representative's job. Only women had those. Men wouldn't understand it probably. Men are dumb. There are little jokes in here somewhere. And they got real serious about some jobs where we were having more than 100% force loss in a year. Force loss means people quitting. And I know, so you can't have more than 100. Yes, if you have to hire them 4 times every week, you'll have thousands of percent. And we had places where it would go well over 100%. How come? Well, look at the other companies. Well, they're all bad. We better look at the job. Now, that's a salient point. I never got back to questionnaires again. Never. When they said, look at these jobs. And my book finally ended up, Motivation Through Work Itself. I was president here in '69. It came out in December of '68. And my presidential address here, which was beyond belief in its beauty, which was...
That's what I hear.
Weren't you here? You didn't? Well, Ray Bowers had a wonderful article in POQ, The Obstinate Audience, just a year before. And I asked Ray, could I steal your title? Instead of The Obstinate Audience, The Obstinate Employee. And I just fed in data from studies that we had made. And I don't have a copy of anything I've ever written because it's in a box somewhere in the world because of changing addresses.
Well, AAPOR is establishing an archives, and someday they'll have a copy of the books.
I wonder if you could talk about being president of AAPOR in really a major period of political change and political crisis in the
Well,
U.S.
we could do a little more chronologically because before somebody gets to be president, you have to be chairman of the Standards Committee.
Yeah.
That was a very important role at that time at AAPOR. So, Bob, could you say something about?
Yeah, I gladly. In 1946, and that was our get-together meeting. I think I missed a 47 million meeting in
Williamstown.
because I was changing jobs to AT&T. And then I started back enjoying AAPOR and annoying people in meetings with questions and so on, especially if Shirley Starr were around or you. And I got nominated chairman of standards in 1957, and I looked it up in the back of a meeting place, and I found I was in it for 2 years, 57 and 58. And reading that wonderful book, and I do have it here, I brought it with me. I find that I had promised in 1957 that we would have a code by 1958, a written code, because the Standards Committee, and I don't know who all was in it. Murfield was surely. Murfield was. He was having trouble in California poll, cheap, bad research being put out. And he was a backbone of my committee. I was not the backbone. I think they liked having me because I had no irons to hammer. You know, I had no competition now in the belt system. And but people here have problems, and I think maybe if I contributed anything, and that's doubtful, and I say that sincerely and with modesty, it was only, I didn't have a, what do you call it, a fish to fry or something. I could listen to the various people talking about their problems, and I promised, for I read it in the book here, the book can't be wrong, in 1957 Standards Committee meeting like this, I said we would have a code by 58, and we had it. And it was adopted, as I recall, unanimously.
But not without some argument.
Not without
Did you
some
tell
wonderful.
about some of those arguments?
Oh, they were just wonderful. Our assistant, and this guy and I, endlessly drinking together. Our wonderful, charming, handsome devil said, this is our draft. The draft is just, I guess this is the one that was accepted unanimously by the members, but this is just before they voted on it. As I remember now, I could be wrong. This is appropriately pious. We have no one to administer. See, I pledged to this. I pledged to this. I pledged. It's, you read the book. I mean, it's only 2 pages long. If you have it, you should read it. Who's going to administer the pledge, says Ira. We have no one to administer. Well, where are their credentials if they're pledging? They just elect. They pay the dues. Oh, come on. We can't. Where are our police? We don't have a police force. We don't have a jail. We don't have anything. If they want to break it, don't break it. This is just an exercise in futility. And then he said the thing that was, we just tell him off drinks for at least half an hour. He said, we are nothing but a clam chowder and marching society. That's all AAPOR is. And, oh, the Irish got it. I don't think I was in the chair. The president was in the chair, and I was, this is 1958, long before I was president. But I had presented what we wanted to do, you know. But nonetheless, we survived. And I, when I talked to the young woman who called me, what's her?
Dawn.
Dawn. I said, I looked up in the back of it. That's the same code that we wrote. Has it ever been revised? She said, not as far as I know. I said, well, don't look it up, because I want to say that. No, you stay out of it. No one. That's my code. But it's been revised a lot. It really is, in its format, it's still the same, and it's only 2 pages, really. And because of this meeting being called by, what's their name again?
Dawn?
Dawn, yeah. one of us is beginning to have memory lapses, not I. Don Nelson. Look, I remember that. I told her that I'll come to the meeting, but if anyone says it's not my code, I'm going home.
I think that we need to break for a minute so that people can get to another meeting.
All
And
right.
then we'll start up again in like 3 or 4 minutes. Okay? And this is to like out you very briefly in the meeting place. I wrote the chapter on polls.
Oh,
And you were president in 1968-69
Yeah,
in a kind of intriguing period in American politics.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like we were moving from one crisis to another
Mm-hmm.
in the political system, and also maybe from one crisis to another in the world of survey research.
yeah.
Because there was a huge controversy before the 1968 convention about the accuracy of the public polls. Gallup and Harris, and AAPOR actually attempted to set up some sort of, or help along an investigation or a study or trying to bring some closure to that. Do you recall getting your involvement in that?
No, I don't, and I can see what had happened to me because I was able to focus in the Bell System companies on a problem of work, the work itself. It was not our pension system is bad or our health benefits. No one challenges. The employees like them. What was it? It was the job. Well, what do we do about it? And I was never really allowed to return to questionnaire survey work and so on. And I'll be glad to talk about that. And I could say, yeah, I sort of lost interest in it. I never went back to doing any work with questionnaires. I found very often use other methods of research. I guess you call them focused groups now. I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I was getting away from it.
I'd like to hear more of what you discovered. You started out with
General questionnaire.
questionnaires, worker satisfaction toward this, toward that, toward the other thing. But then you found that it was much more important,
Well, the thing you
general principles were
Yeah.
more important, and I think that's what
that was the
major
thing.
contribution that you made.
Well, that's what I made, and why, in a way, I found myself not in the mainstream of AAPOR any longer, but it was the work itself that was the problem, and what do we do about it? And I pointed out, thanks to the work and interviewing we would then do, often in what I guess you call them now focused groups, that when you get a switchboard hardwired, forget it, some woman's got to sit there and run the damn thing. The mistake is too late. She said, well, tell Western Electric, it's too late. Tell Bell Labs. That's where it came from. And so I was put in Bell Labs for 2 years. And it was a thoroughly mistaken idea, but I don't know that that's of interest to you.
Well,
I think that we would-
your contribution, that's your major contribution as a social scientist was from that work, and that's the essence of your book, was it not?
Yeah.
Could you say just what the general principle was and what you discovered and what we should all know?
Sure. And because right up to the end, and I did get a lovely fanfare, long articles and pictures of me and my successor on the work itself as a motive, and we called my book Motivation Through Work Itself.
Okay.
And as you know, in the universities, if you don't have publications, you're going to perish. Publish or perish. The rule at AT&T was, if you publish, you'll perish. You don't talk about our business. Now, that's not true of the labs, by the way. The labs, you know, I was there, they had 12, what is the worldwide prize?
Nobel Prize
No,
winners.
we had 12. the transistor cable and all that. It's the three men, I knew them to say hello. And they put me there to do something about it, and really all you had to do was point out to them, when it's hardwired, this is equipment. All you can do from then now is, well, work faster, work faster. And it's too late, because there's no responsibility. And what could you do to put little games into it? I'm going to set how many calls I'm going to make. I'm not feeling so good this morning. I got to make 650 today. I'm going to say 300 this morning and 350 this afternoon. I used that illustration advisedly. Guess where I found that? Japan. They were doing that sort of thing. So I had a great chance to get around the world. My book was Kazuya, you know. We spent 3 weeks at the expense of the Japanese Personnel Association. But you see, I'm not of much interest to AAPOR any longer. I'm working on the work itself. And we call it motivation through work itself.
What was the most difficult research problem you ever had to face? What was the hardest?
Research problem.
Could be innocent.
I'm having trouble with that. We were all Louis Gutman fans at the time, you know, right through our work at in the War Department. But come to think of it, when we got to Veterans Administration, Gutman scaling was not really relevant to much of it. What courses would you like to have if you could take them, or how much insurance could you have, things of that sort. Over there, it's also...
What did you ever face any barriers in terms of getting research done, either at AT&T or before that?
It was not a big problem in my life, but
Good.
it was not. It was really not a problem.
When you spoke with Dawn,
Yeah.
you said something about the hiring practices at AT&T.
Oh,
And I think that involves Jack.
I almost hate to prolong,
Tell that story.
Yeah.
except that now we said the company.
Yeah.
I hate to,
We can edit that out.
Hmm?
We can edit that out.
because I tell you, I'm going to cry again. So I did it. We're getting angry still.
Can I say something about it?
Yes, you tell them. You tell them.
After we worked in the War Department in this research branch, Bob got this job in AT&T.
And needed help.
And it needed help. And there were some of us who had gotten jobs yet who were still hanging around in the War Department. We were younger, didn't have jobs, and Bob thought he was going to try. Bob was going to help us.
For I was asking to do more, do more.
So he found two young guys there. One of them was higher assistant, and the other was myself. And said maybe he can get some jobs over at AT&T. So indeed, he arranged to for us to be interviewed over at AT&T, and I know I spent at least one day there, going from this office to that office to the personnel office to this vice president or whatever. Everybody was kind and sweet and interested, and seemed to be interested in what I had done, what I said. And I think Ira went through that same
Yeah.
sort of routine, Ira's isn't it?
Charming, intelligent men.
And nothing happened. Nothing happened. I don't know if you want to say it.
You said.
I'll say it. Well, they weren't hiring Jews at the time. They didn't say it that way, but it was clear, at least from Bob's explaining it to us subsequently, because he, being not Jewish, he was able to talk with them at whatever level they wanted to talk about, and that's what he discovered. But I have to say this, I mean, I hold this to Bob, to Bob. He tried to break that. I mean, he physically tried to break it. I don't know, possibly at some cost to your own standing in AT&T for trying to get characters like this into AT&T. So I don't know when it was eventually broken, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
Many years later, but at
And
that
also-
time there was still this big barrier.
And it was pocketed. If you would take all the Jews out of the Bell Labs, the goddamn thing would fall apart.
No,
Well, then,
even then,
well, I bet of the 12 Nobel winners, I'll bet some of them were Jewish. I'm not sure. But that was in no way. This was just one part. And throughout the associated companies, it wasn't true. There were some companies, and now look, we're going back half of a century. If you knew anything, you knew the Catholics had a big edge in that company. New England, I'll just say it flat out. New York, not Jews, oddly enough, Catholics. They had an edge. And I'll bet I never inquired into it, and believe me, I didn't want to know. I just got sick at it. But I did have a chance, as I've told him quietly. A young man who came in from Bell Labs and was asked to come. Jewish, extremely competent. They wanted him because he knew more about how could you talk on a telephone and have a little picture of the person in Chicago and a picture of the man. And he knew more than anybody. And he was interviewed the way you were. We were good friends because of some work I have to describe. He came down and did something you don't do. He closed the door and said, "I have got to talk." And I said, "Well, Ed, I'm so nice, glad to see you," and so on, so on. And he said, "They've offered me this job, and this is a hellhole, isn't it?" And I said, "Don't talk like that." And then he said to me, and I said to him, I said, "Let's break it." And he stayed.
well, it's the kind of people that somehow migrate to AAPOR. And then you became president, as we said. You became president of AAPOR. And what were some of the issues?
But really, that he, I won't say his name, he was rated so high. And he came in through the back door. What do you mean? Bell Labs.
Yeah.
And he became a front runner. What do you call that? A little animal that's out front. And that's all over. And I know whereof I speak. But no, I've been out of there 26, 27 years. And that's all over. That's why I hate this story.
But it's very telling. It's very, I think it's very important. We all think it's very important. Yes, but let's get back to AAPOR and the presidency.
I know I didn't do much for AAPOR. I had my hands so full with just the work itself. Okay, one thing I did learn, though, and I don't think it, instead of using questionnaires so much, I found that when it came to the work itself as the motivator, that if the work is not interesting, you can't pay people. After the first 2 months, they've forgotten it. When am I going to get my next raise? But if you could give them little games or something to do, it's in the work, and they could set it. And that's what the work itself was. Now, then I started the movement of training, no questionnaires now. And it went like wildfire for a few years. We called it green light sessions. Do you know what a green light session is?
It's like greenlighting a movie, giving permission or...
Yeah, and I'd train some, let's say, switchboard operators, and that's a hard job because it is wired. what could we do? Now, and I've told them about how important it is to have work where you have some control. What could we do? Now, you're all, by the way, not employees. You do this with the first level of management, the second level of management. This is where it's got to be done. And you'd get an easel pad, and I'd get a big black pencil, and I'd rip it off and give it to, I said, hang that up right over there. Here's the stuff. I'd use one of them. You'd write another. What could you do? Well, I wish they wouldn't make me say something. We do this to our people. Put up your hand if you want to go to the toilet. Couldn't we let them bump each other on the knee or something? They said, well, now wait a minute, you can't do that. Now wait a minute, you just threw a red light. This is a green light session. We've had enough of that now. Please, later on, red light. Wait. And we never get to red lighting, by the way. And that was called green lighting, green light sessions. And it went like mad. They would take a job, and I have seen them literally put up pads, sheets from a big easel pad, the full length of this room. And then they would have things like you just said, you're my fall girl, about, what was it? Oh yeah, she objected. Well, they wouldn't put that up. They would start writing, and I say, you're not allowed to put that. That's a red light. You're telling me why we can't do it. I want to know what could we do, and what could we do. And some magical things get done in a week. No questionnaires. Do you understand me? You left the problem with them.
I think what we want to ask is, this sounds to me like this is really the origins and evolution of focus groups. If that just, I've been curious as to whether you think of that as sort of developing the focus group model.
See, I read about focus groups, but I think that's what it is, isn't it?
You said earlier you would call what you did a focus group now.
Yeah, as far as I know, but I've never been in a focus group.
And you didn't label it as such.
And I mean to tell you, I've done this at vice presidential level.
When did you?
I mean, and I got to the place where I couldn't work any longer at lower levels. There are too many goddamn reasons. That general manager's got to get out of there. Do you understand me? No, I don't. Tell me what's going wrong. They're off at that level. Same problem.
And this would have been, you started doing this in the 1950s?
I was doing this heavily in the 1960s. And then I left there in by 74. I think it had probably pretty well died down, but it had become a way of life. You say, let's get the easel pad. You know, you didn't even call it a green light. And you knew when the easel pad's out, you're to shut up as far as red light.
I think that there are a couple of AAPOR issues that we kind of haven't gotten to. And one question that everybody's being asked is their favorite memory at AAPOR, at an AAPOR conference.
Well, we started this with a little episode before this discussion, and if Bob did claims not to have been a very active and involved president, he was certainly very active and after 8-4 hours, as we might say. First thing I did when I came in is I reminded him of a little song that he used to sing to all of us, and I wouldn't object if you sang it to us right now.
I swear I haven't.
The Class of 22.
Yeah, I was in the 8th grade, and I wanted these people, our mothers and fathers were there, and I wanted them to know that we were no ordinary little dumbbells. Some of us could speak foreign languages now. Keep out of this. And it goes like this. We're the Clyde Hart, no, Clyde, he was the president here. Clyde Lewis, he and I wrote this. We wrote the music to it. I know you're going to say you didn't write that music, but we told our parents we did. We're the class of 22. We say goodbye to you. Off to high school we go. And before we'll tell you what we can do. And now we're on our way. Before we go, we'll say adieu to you. The class of 22. French. And we wrote it in French.
It's the Sheik of Araby, if I'm...
Oh, no. No, they stole it. Didn't they? You say yes, say
I
yes.
first heard it from Bob.
Well, is it now, Jack, would you say that might be Bob's favorite AAPOR memory?
That's my favorite memory of hearing Bob sing that.
Well, the God's truth is, I was so busy with my work itself. It was called the work itself effort, not job. Nationally, it'd be called job enrichment effort. But we didn't like that. That sounds like, and that was not our problem. We paid well. Where were we?
Oh, yes, we had Jack's favorite AAPOR memory in your singing, and now would it be fair to say that that's your favorite AAPOR memory, or is there another?
No, so it became, after hours, my favorite memories, and to see them again, it really was the reason I came and I came and I came.
And you recall the Sagamore Hotel?
Oh, I do it.
You recall them marching into the
Yes.
dinner with
I
somebody on your
was-
arm?
I was surprised that the presidential address now is at noon.
There was a reason for it.
Okay,
It
okay.
changed some years ago.
Okay, well anyhow, ours was always an evening meeting, and I made sure I didn't drink too much that evening before the meeting. And I have this speech, the obstinate employee. Good evening. I want to say in advance that I stole this idea from Ray Bowers. He's out there. He wrote the obstinate audience, and I'm going to tell you about the obstinate employee, and on and on. And just then the door opens up from the home, and the whole flock of people come in carrying cakes with candles on, or something with candles on, and posters, and back to Hollerith cards. Enough, down with the computers, and they marched right by my podium, and I had to stop. And there's my dear wife sitting down there. They're like, it was a high spot. And of course, I think I played it out. I told them, leave, and all that stuff, knowing damn well they were gonna.
Well, we heard about this event last night by Kurt and Gladys Lang and their description of it. The AAPOR history describes you as considerably shaken.
I was. But I would say that after I think Merv was in the parade, and he had been such a stalwart in our standards committee that I knew that rascal's up to it.
I think maybe just one more question, because we don't know. We know about you from your PhD on. We don't know about you beforehand. Where were you born? Were you always interested in sort of these sorts of issues, social science? As you said that you didn't want to go into statistics and math, or you didn't want to teach math. You wanted to keep doing what you were doing.
I came out of college in 1931. I dropped out for a full semester. I was driving cab driver in Pittsburgh, green cabs, and that's pretty rough work. You learn all. And I went back to Penn State. I couldn't afford Pitt anymore. $300 a year. No, $300 a year, $150 a semester. Couldn't afford that. And I did get my degree. And all you could get was a job teaching math. That was on my certificate as a minor field. But social studies was of no interest. I mean, everyone's qualified, but that's what I mean. But not many are qualified for math. And I liked math, but it didn't intrigue me. And I just wanted to get out of high school. And I taught for 9 years math. Went to Pitt at night, Saturdays, no Sundays. One wonderful summer, University of Chicago, Sam Stafford, magical, that whole staff. And I got my PhD that way. And then as soon as I could, now I want to get into social psychology was my field. There was no such degree as social psychology. I don't know, there may not be one now.
There, I think.
Pitt invented one, really. 5 people on my PhD committee, 3 from sociology, 2 from psychology. It was an innovation, and I don't know whether they would do it now or not.
And you are from Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I was born and raised in immigrant parents, Irish and from Protestant Ireland, for heaven's sake. And my mother came in from Land's End, England, Penzance, and they were immigrants. And all 6 of us were born here, 7 of us. One died, and life was awfully hard. There was no money, really. The idea of someone in the family giving me money to go to college was ridiculous. You earned it. But I was handled very well. And one of the guys, he turned out to be a splendid physician, got tired of seeing me in those pool hall where I shot pool and bowled. And he went and spoke to the dean, assistant dean, University of Pittsburgh, and said, this guy ought to be in school. And he set it up, and I went in, and they gave me an intelligence test, and they said I passed. And then they said, why don't you start going to school? I said, I can't. I'll get you a job. And the assistant dean got me a job, believe it, YMHA, tell them what that is.
Young Men's Hebrew Association.
He got me a job there running the soda fountain because a lot of Jews are not allowed to run
On Saturday, yes.
on dairy products.
Oh, they can't mix dairy products with meat products.
Yeah, and they needed me, and so that got me in, and they let me pay $10 a month till I got it was $150 a semester. They were awfully good, you know. And then I finally ran out of money again. Ended up.
I find this, I mean, you've come back to working jobs to get your education,
Yeah.
and your career is about the job
Yeah.
and making the job
Yeah,
better.
there's no doubt that it's fascinating. It seems to everyone when they hear, well, he says that the nature of the job, the work itself, is important. So, for Christ's sake, everyone knows that. I said, do they? What do? Get out the easel pad. You know, that's what happened to me. I got knocked out of the box as far as question is. And then I found, this will interest you too, say yes. And then I'll stop if you want.
Okay.
For Fred Stefan, one of our presidents was in on this program. The Bell system decided that they were getting out of contact because of inbredness. And they started at Asbury Park, New Jersey, the Bell System Executive Conference. First it was 3 weeks, and they made it 2. They had people like Fred Stefan come on. He was big in statistics, census and so on. And we did economists and so on and so on. And they made me assistant director. You had to have a assistant vice president direct it, and I was assistant. And I was getting the speakers, and we'd have classes and, again, run as much as possible under what's the topic and what do we know about it ourselves, get the easel pad. And I worked on that for 2 years. So I had all kinds of jobs, you know, and that's why the AAPOR was not really so central to me, you know.
But clearly you were central to AAPOR, and AAPOR members thought you were central to AAPOR.
Nevertheless, they elected you chair of
Yes.
standards. They elected you the president of AAPOR
Well, you know,
for some reason.
they gave, I know this will bore you, but they begged me to take a job in Bell Labs. I didn't want it. and the budget was $1 million and some a year, and I was to bring in 10 people, and a woman, 11, she's to be secretary, you understand that, boy? And see what we could get them to do in the field where you work. And I worked at that for 2 years, and I said, I can't do anything. And Mort Deutsch, you know Mort
More
Deutsch.
Deutsch, a psychologist, social psychologist.
He was there for 2 years with me.
I didn't know that.
And people of that quality, he's a very able man. And we never figured out what we could do. And so I got out of there.
Well,
So I had some periods where things were not so hot. That was a bad years for me. And that was partly due to the success of the Bell System Executive Conference. Now, let's start it going in the laboratory. But that's a hard science laboratory. That's not a social science lab. That was a bad fit.
Well, now you're here at AAPOR, and there'll be after-hours events too, past the banquet. There'll be tonight, so we'll have good times.
we have some remnants of the clam chowder and marching societies.
Really? Am I invited?
And they also have probability sessions,
A probability session?
applied probability, poker,
Oh.